This project researches the area of the San Luis Obispo Mission, the Historical Museum, and its vicinity. This particular area contains rich socio-historical information of cultural interaction between the Spanish, the Mexicans, the natives, and the Anglos. Our main focus is the racial relationships that took place in the forms of violence, specifically defined within the frame of vigilantism and the occurrence of lynchings. In 1771, Father Junipero Serra founded Mission San Luis Obispo de Tolosa. Although he founded the mission in San Luis Obispo, the building was completed 20 years later with the supervision by Father Jose Caballero. Since the native population was employed as workers for the mission, they were housed in the dwellings built around the mission. There were family-style houses, a granary, a weaving room, and 6 adobe houses. This was done for practical purposes and as a form of keeping the population close and making control easier. Because of the unwanted colonization of the indigenous population, unrest was inevitable. They were expected to forsake their homes, land, and join the mission, changing their beliefs and way of life. Unfortunately, unpaid labor was an important aspect of the missions being built and striving. In the early 1800s, unrest between the indigenous population and the missionaries were common. Soon after Mexico won independence from Spain, Mexican Congress decreed that all Californians must sign an oath of allegiance to Mexico. In 1834, Mexican Congress approved the Secularization Act, which meant that all mission lands became property of Mexico. First, 15 years later, California officially became the 31st state. 5 years later, in 1856, San Luis Obispo was incorporated as a town. The mission was the first jail and courthouse in San Luis Obispo. Under Father John Hartnett's control, Mission de Tolosa underwent a second renovation in 1933. The church was built into an L shape in order to accommodate more people. With the establishment of the mission and the historical presence of the major populations that inhabited the area, the element of race became the marker for the institutionalization of modes of oppression. A state of violence was created by the Vigilance Committee. It is within this root that vigilantism became a method to control the Western society where the state was not present. It quickly turned racist, focusing on the native Californian, Latino, and indigenous populations. Vigilantism was used soon after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo at a rate rivaling the lynching of blacks in the South. The following poem states the violence and criminal condition of the old days in San Luis Obispo. Down from a many craggy peak, up from a many dark ravine, while winter winds are blowing bleak, or summer airs are felt serene, low moaning whispers reach my ear, and specters seem to hover round, which while I list with shuddering fear, point out the dark and bloody ground. Many a tale of crime they tell, of murders done for love of gold, would shame the very fiends of hell, could they the deeds on earth behold.
Love of mine, someday you will die, but I'll be close behind. I'll follow you into the dark, no blinding light or tunnels to gates of white, just our hands clasped so tight, waiting for the hint of a spark. If heaven and hell decide that they both are satisfied, and illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs. If there's no one beside you when your soul embarks, then I'll follow you into the dark. In Catholic school, as vicious as Roman rule, I got my knuckles bruised by a lady in black, and I held my tongue as she told me, son, fear is the heart of love. So I never went back. And if heaven and hell decide that they both are satisfied, illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs. If there's no one beside you when your soul embarks, then I'll follow you into the dark. You and me have seen everything to see, from Bangkok to Calgary, and the soles of your shoes are all worn down. The time for sleep is now, but it's nothing to cry about, 'cause we'll hold each other soon in the blackest of rooms. And if heaven and hell decide that they both are satisfied, and illuminate the nose
On May 20th, 1858, Walter Murray, who later became the district judge, and 140 other citizens formed the San Luis Obispo Executive Committee of Vigilance, and as recorded by the San Luis Obispo Historical Museum, they officially sentenced more than 10 alleged criminals, although numerous accounts are still lost. The igniting appearance of the committee was the result of the murder of the Basque Frenchman Pedro Obiesa and M. Graciano in late 1857. The alleged criminal Nieves Robles, associated with another criminal, Pierre Linares, were acquitted. Nieves Robles was taken out into what is now the intersection of Monterey and Broad, and here a single heavy rope dangled from a sturdy beam. Vigilantism became ethno-racial and class violence, or a threat of violence cloaked in pseudo-populist appeal to higher laws and sovereignties. The vigilantes' actions shaped a racial caste system, defeated radical labor movements, and reinforced segregation. The location of the mission and the historical museum became a place of lynching. One account tells that prior to this one legal execution, however, there were plenty of lynchings carried out by the Vigilance Committee, many of which occurred in that very spot on the mission grounds. In 1858, Walter Murray wrote a series of letters to the San Francisco Bulletin in which he described 10 years' worth of work by the Vigilance Committee. From 1850 to 1934, there was an increase in racial tension that led to mass arrests, anti-picketing ordinances, evictions, beatings, kidnappings, deportations, and lynchings. The lynchings not only physically affected the people, but also created emotional damage. Fleeing the city or subjugation to the dominant culture practices seemed like a good alternative for males. Analyzing the lynching in cultural frames helps us to delineate the current demographics of the county and the city in particular. We can argue that the repercussions of vigilantism affected the racial and multicultural history of the city and affected the male persona by the use of violence. A last report would then summarize how the press saw actions perpetrated. A vigilance committee was organized on May 20, 1858 for the repression and punishment of crime by all means whatsoever. Leading citizens of San Luis Obispo like William Graves, Dana, and Price, who felt that courts were too lenient, were members. They took immediate action and seized, tried, and publicly hanged several men. As hangings proceeded, the vigilantes grew in number. There were opposition, however, from the Spanish-language paper El Clamo Público, which criticized the committee's actions. Its statements indicated that racial feelings were involved. The committee soon disbanded, but its actions probably helped to end San Luis Obispo's reputation as a place sustained and fostered by the fruits of assassination and robbery. This account sees the actions of the committee as legally bounded by the ends of crime and assassination. Much of the cultural and social historical collision of the area of the Mission and Historical County Museum has its roots in the race construct. Californios, Latinos, and Native Americans suffered and continue to find themselves cast away from an area that has long belonged to them. As Takaki says, America is a nation peopled by the world, and we are all Americans. This is why this ethnogenocide should not be forgotten from the multicultural history of San Luis Obispo, since it shapes the current cultural and political frame in which we now live.
Come together right now over me.